Hi everybody. So in this video, I just want to go over the planner that I made to give you just a couple pieces of advice about this and about actually planning for your paper. So in the videos that I made you for as feedback for the argument um, presentation that you did, I kind of went through and made notes and showed you kind of a basic Word document for the most part of how your paper might actually get divided and organized. And you can see that this organizer doesn't exactly follow that structure. It's got kind of like the argument mapped out over here and the counter arguments down here. Usually in a semester, I will convert this assignment so that it looks more like the outline I told you about on the planner. But this semester, because we're going through like the process of review that we're going to be going through, I have to submit all these things. So I wanted the document to look the same as all the other documents that are being submitted for this course amongst the mini sections. So I'm going to leave it as it is here. I think that this way of presenting the information is just another way of you to kind of take the information and feedback that I gave you the last time and hone it a little bit. But when you go to present it to actually figure out the order of your paper, like where do I put in the subheadings? Where do they go? Where do the counter arguments go? I want you to pay attention to that feedback that I already gave you about structuring your argument. This is just about, again, looking at the logic and making sure it's sound and making sure you have a plan for ethos, pathos, and logos. So the first section, the first box, I also don't love the boxes. So if you want to do, if you don't like all the lines and everything and the way that it's formatted in the template, you can download this one and just erase and write over it if you like the way that I've set it up here better. You can use this as a template as well. The first box is about the argument question, which is not really something we've talked about. We kind of jumped straight to the answer. But this question is basically just the question that you're answering. And it is a good way to double check and make sure that you're actually asking a question that can be argued. So if you're answering questions like that are more focused on why or how, those might, if those are your questions, you might want to watch out because maybe your thesis is a little bit too informational. The question I'm asking is should. Questions like should, could, what should be done, what should we do, what can we do? Those might be more helpful for an argument, for getting an argument thesis. Should institutes of higher learning have dress code policies? And my answer is career focused, so I qualified it a little bit. Career focused institutes of higher learning should consider dress code policies because they will ensure that students will appear professional as they begin to network. They will promote professional attire, and they will acclimate students to meeting the demands of a professional culture. So you can see that I pulled all of my different support reasons and put them into my thesis. But the real heart of my thesis is yes, they should. And you know that that can be argued and that people can disagree because if you think back to the sample that I actually wrote for, I can't remember what it is now. Maybe, for the argument presentation itself. When I created an argument presentation, I was actually arguing the exact opposite. So you might be like, whoa, she completely changed her mind. I did that on purpose to show you that this is a situation, this is a topic that I'm talking about that can be responded to in various multiple differing ways. And that's what you want in an argument. So I kind of flipped it to show like I can argue either of them. When we look down here at my reasons, what I've done here in bold, ultimately these are going to be the subheadings of my paper. And in fact, I have this other thing that you can see. And maybe I'll include this as, maybe I'll include this as a resource in the instructional materials. This is how I have it written out as it will kind of appear in the paper. So you can see that this is the structure of my paper with the headings and the subheadings included. So this is maybe like a more clear outline for how the paper is actually going to be written on the paper. More of an outline, less of a planner. So as we're looking through here, what I have as pre-professional networking, professional attire, and acclimation expectations in a professional environment, those are just going to be the subsections of my paper. So, and then here underneath, I have a sentence that basically explains my point of view. It's a complete sentence kind of explaining what this means. A complete sentence explaining what that means, a complete sentence explaining what that means. it's kind of a summary of what I'm trying to prove in this section. Keep in mind when you go to actually write these sections, they're going to be paragraphs long, and it'll be up to you to determine how to split up the paragraphs and how to organize your material so every paragraph is about a single specific subject with a clear topic sentence. For each of these, I have sources. You can see that some of the sources might be used in multiple places. This source may only be used here. Maybe I use one of the sources down here. So you can see that I've got some sources. You want to have sources for each section. And try and get, there's only one here. I would recommend trying to get at least two, even if you use a source, an article in multiple places, that's fine, but try to get 2 or 3 for each section. Because a really good rule of thumb that I'm going to advise you guys to follow is you want to get a source, a quoted source, a paraphrased source, a summarized source into every single body paragraph of the paper. You don't have to have it in the intro or the conclusion, but every other paragraph, sometimes you can get away with it with not having any in the rebuttal. Sometimes you'll want some in the rebuttal, it's kind of up to you. But for the most part, for the body of the paper and these support sections of the paper, every body paragraph, you want at least one type of support. Here are questions about ethos, pathos, and logos. So remember that ethos is the appeal to authority, pathos is the appeal to emotion, and logos is the appeal to logic. What you're explaining here is not necessarily how your topic itself might induce pathos or how the topic itself is logical. You're explaining how you were going to include these appeals yourself. How are you going to make the argument you're presenting stronger? So when you appeal to authority, there's 2 ways to appeal to authority. You can appeal to authority as in appeal to your own authority, that you have the knowledge and you have the right and you have the ability to be taken seriously as an academic writer. Mostly what that means is making sure that your paper follows the rules of academic writing, and specifically that it follows the rules of citation. So that's one way to increase authority. Another way is by using sources who have ethos themselves. So if you look at my example, to up my own authority, I said I'm going to use smart thinking to check my paper for APA citation and for grammatical errors to ensure that I have a level of authority as a student. That I can claim to be somebody whose argument should be taken seriously. I will also use authoritative sources in my paper, such as the Bureau of Labor Statistics and John Smith, who is a hiring consultant for numerous billion-dollar companies. When you talk about this, you want to explain why your sources should be trusted, why they have authority. Pathos. That's the appeal to emotion. You can appeal to lots of different emotions. When we talk about pathos, we tend to talk about stories that are moving in a sad way, stories that appeal to our sense of empathy. But it doesn't have to just be that. You can also use fear as a motivator. You can use anger as another pathos appeal. Here I explain I will use the personal anecdote from the SME article in my hook to show how a student with a stellar GPA missed out on his dream job because he struggled to present himself as a serious professional. So I'm going to use an anecdote. Anecdotes are often a good way to go. And if you look here, you'll see that I said that I'm going to use it in my hook. I think that that is a fantastic place to use pathos. Pathos is an appeal that is hard to work with because sometimes when you play with emotion, it backfires. You cannot always be sure how your audience is going to respond to emotion. If you're a very good writer, you can typically use pathos to your effect, but sometimes when you include pathos, it can go a little bit haywire. You may want to make people feel sad and sympathetic, and it might backfire and they just feel angry and like you're trying to manipulate them. So you have to be careful with pathos, which is one reason I recommend trying to include pathos in your hook. Logos. Logos is the appeal to logic. So you really want this argument to have logos throughout. It should be logical. Here you can see that I gave some specific examples of how I'm going to appeal to logic. I've checked my reasons for any logical fallacies. That's a great way to do it. And have made sure that all of my rebuttals respond directly to my counterclaims. I will use a statistic from the Jones et al. Article that shows 85% of hiring managers claim that personal appearance in an interview factors into a candidate being hired. I think I made that up. I think that all of this research is fake. So if you're like, wait, I can't find this article, sorry. I think I made these articles up. But this would be an example of the type of thing that you would want to do without making it up. Actually pull it from your sources. And then here, this section about the counterclaim, I've actually bumped all of it down here. So it says like, see you next page below, so you can see. And here's my counterclaims. So I included, again, because when I'm going to write my paper, I'm probably going to want to put this in as the subheading. And then my main counterclaim is that not all technical trades require professional attire. So an opponent might be like, well, why do we need dress codes if not every trade requires professional attire? And then here's my rebuttal. And you can see that I start with this language. And it's actually, this isn't a rebuttal, this is a refutation, because I'm saying it's true. But many jobs that graduates seek might lead to management jobs or public-facing jobs, so it's not a bad idea to get the skills in now. Okay, and then my next one is learning how to dress appropriately of one's own volition is part of maturing into being a professional. And then my rebuttal to that is sure. And so again, this is a rebuttal, not a refutation. And I use that language again, perhaps. I'm conceding the point a little bit, but a mandate could help those students who want to dress professionally but struggle to understand how to do so. Okay, so those are my refutations. And that's basically what I want you to go through and do.